was very, very inspired to give something of Krishna consciousness to the people of this world. And we understand Mahaprabhu has his internal and external reasons for coming into the world. But it becomes very clear when you see his pastimes that Mahaprabhu was not interested in just coming to the world and relishing Krishna consciousness and experiencing the mood of Srimati Radharani, how she was attracted and drawn towards Krishna. But he was very, very interested to make sure that what he is experiencing is experienced by other people as well. And so this brings up a good question. How do we experience the nectar that Mahaprabhu came to give? How do we become eventually someday mad with Krishna consciousness? How do we feel that bliss, that joy, that ecstasy in bhakti that Mahaprabhu came to give? And then he gave that task to the 6 Goswamis, who gave that task to their disciples, who gave it to their disciples, who gave it to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who gave it to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who gave it to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave it to his disciples, and they're telling us, here is what Mahaprabhu is coming to give, and we're trying to give it to you. How do we actually experience it, right? Because it's like someone gives you a very delicious cookie, but if you have just had coronavirus, then you have no taste buds. So you eat the cookie, but you don't get any taste. And I was thinking about this example when I was thinking about my chanting of the holy names. It is like this delicious cookie, which has so much flavor, but because I have the coronavirus, I cannot taste the sweetness of the holy name, or as the acharyas would use the example of jaundice. But nowadays we can use coronavirus because it's a more common disease, and people lose their sense of taste after having coronavirus. So the question really is, how do we taste that nectar that Mahaprabhu came to give? I'd like to open my discussion today with a verse from Sri Chaitanya Chandramrita by Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, who says, one who is untouched by any piety. Untouched by any piety means this person is not pious at all. They have no piety. Who is completely absorbed in irreligion. Hare Krishna. Gorhar, is this your father? Jai. Hare Krishna. Guten Tag. Guten Tag. Bonjour. I'm not sure if you speak German or French, but welcome to our little gathering. We are discussing about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I don't know how much context I should give you if you're aware of who this person is, but he was this, I will tell you in brief, he was an ecstatic madman who was absorbed in love of God and always dancing and singing, and he wanted to give that happiness to the rest of the world. So his birthday is coming up in a week, and we are talking about him today. So welcome to our little gathering. So this is a verse by Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati. He says, one who is untouched by any piety, meaning this person has no piety, no good credits, no good karma. He is completely absorbed in irreligion. He has no religious vows, no religious practices, or who has never received the merciful glance of the devotees. This person is so irreligious, so impious, and he's never been around devotees or been to any holy place sanctified with them. So nor has he been to any holy places. He's describing probably the average person in Kali Yuga, right? They don't have a lot of piety. They're not very religious. They haven't received the merciful glance of devotees. They've never been to a holy place. Prabodhananda Saraswati Pad writes, will still ecstatically dance, loudly sing, and even roll about on the ground when he becomes intoxicated by tasting the nectar of the transcendental mellows of pure love of God given by Lord Chaitanya. So such a fallen person can still experience the highest state of devotional ecstasy, of devotional bliss, if he receives the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he says, let me therefore glorify that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's two very, very important points in this verse. The first point is, generally in this world, the way the world works is, if you've been a good person, you get good things, right? If you've been a bad person, you get bad things. So generally speaking, when somebody has been very, very, say, not good, right, then we don't expect them to have very good things in the future. That's how the world works. If you work hard, then you'll be rich. If you don't work hard, you'll be poor. That's usually how the world works. But Mahaprabhu is coming and he's turning the world upside down. He's saying, no, this person has been very sinful, very impious, but by my mercy, even this person can experience the highest spiritual ecstasy. And this is a very important point, because if you look at Hindu philosophy or sort of the history of Vedic religion, generally speaking, things worked in a very step-by-step order. right? So if you wanted to attain liberation, you first had to do, take birth in a Brahmin family. You had to have a pure life. You had to do all these religious activities, practices. Then you had to go through dharma, artha, kama. You had to fulfill your material desires, be religious, be pious. And then you would become qualified for jnana yoga and then eventually liberation. So in the Vedic system, things worked in a sequential order, right? Just like when you go to school, you're in 5th grade, then you're in 6th grade, then you're in 7th grade. But Mahaprabhu is coming and saying, it's okay. Even if you failed, you did nothing good with your life, I will still give you the highest ecstasy just by my mercy. And this is why when Vaishnavism became so popular in India and people, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was spreading Vaishnavism, this was often the criticism Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur received from the caste brahmanas who were saying, how is it possible for a malecha, someone who's eating meat, who was drinking alcohol, who was doing sinful activities, to attain something higher than liberation, to attain love of God? How is this possible? People were really bewildered. So this is the first important point of this verse, is that it is possible. Through Mahaprabhu's mercy, it's possible for anyone who's even very, very fallen to attain the highest goal of life. The second thing that's very interesting in this verse is that this mercy is available, therefore, to everyone. And Mahaprabhu, through his coming, wants everyone to receive this gift, right? In Kali Yuga, everyone is like this. We're all quite fallen. But each and every one of us can receive this mercy of Mahaprabhu and experience something very high in our Krishna consciousness. In other words, not only is Krishna consciousness very merciful, that it can uplift anybody, but that it should be shared. That's also the point of this verse, because everybody in Kali Yuga is like this. And so everybody's qualified and everybody should be given this mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so they can uplift their life. In other words, Krishna consciousness is available for everyone and it should be shared. And these two ideas, that Krishna consciousness is for everyone, there's no qualification. You can be Swiss living in Switzerland, you can be Italian, you can be Indian, you can be German, Russian, Dutch as Huron, you can come from Africa, you can come from any corner of the world, you can have any kind of background. Maybe I know devotees who were butchers, they used to work as butchers. Even in Chicago, we even had a girl who became a devotee some years ago who was actually, this is not nice to say, but for her money, she was doing things that, any woman would be very ashamed to do. I don't want to say it, but I think you understand. And she became a devotee. She got a book at a music festival and she was coming to the temple. She started chanting and everybody was happy with it. Yes, this is Mahaprabhu's movement. You see, Haridas Thakur, he converted a prostitute also. She also became a devotee. So these are the two central ideas I really want to discuss today. That one, Krishna consciousness is available for everyone. And two, that it should be shared, that it should be distributed. And we see this in Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for the first 24 years of his life, he was living in Navadvip. And for the first 16, he was just a young man. Then he started his school and he was teaching. Then he goes to Gaya to offer, for the Shraddha ceremony of his father, as we all know. And in Gaya, he meets his guru, Shri Ishwara Puri. And by that, he receives the transcendental seed of devotional service by which he goes into, his deep state of ecstasy, chanting, dancing. Then he comes back and then takes sannyas. And then, for the next 6 years, he's just preaching. He's traveling through South India. He's going all over the country and he's spreading Krishna consciousness. And for the last 18 years, he's now based in Puri. He's just relishing Krishna consciousness. There's a difference, however, in terms of how Mahaprabhu preached and how we usually preach. Okay, here's the main difference. Mahaprabhu's preaching was by the overflowing of his ecstasy, was just by his magnetic personality. He just relished Krishna consciousness. He was chanting, dancing, singing, and whoever saw him thought, wow, who is this person? Right? We don't generally preach like that. You know what I'm saying? The way we preach is, we organize a program at a yoga studio. We invite people come, they listen to our lecture, we give them a gradual dose of Krishna consciousness. But imagine if you were, like, for example, Gaurahari, if you he's in Switzerland now and he goes to the airport and all of a sudden, he sees the blue plane and he just starts dancing, going crazy because the blue plane reminds him of Krishna, and it's genuine. His devotion, his enthusiasm is completely genuine. People will be touched, people will be moved, and they will think, whoever this person is, he is experiencing something very high. It's not like there's something wrong with him. There's actually a story like this in Chaitanya Bhagavat, where there was once upon a time a Brahmin who saw the ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he saw how much people were glorifying Mahaprabhu. And so after Mahaprabhu was, came out of ecstasy, this Brahmin also started to dance and swing and go into a circle. And then I think it was Srivas Pandit started beating him with a stick. And then this Brahmin was like, why are you beating with a stick? I'm experiencing ecstasy. And Srivas Pandit was like, you're not, you're faking. And when we see your ecstasy, we don't feel happy and joyful when we see Mahaprabhu's ecstasy. So we can tell that you're faking it. So this is the main difference between the way Mahaprabhu preached and the way we usually preach, is he was just preaching by his ecstasy, his happiness, his joy. He would walk around and people would just see this magnetic personality and think, wow, who is this person? And this is so powerful, like when he was visiting the Mayavadi sannyasis in Benares, and Prakashananda Saraswati saw his effulgence and thought, this person must be Narayan himself. And this is and this is ultimately where we want to get to. We want to get to such a deep level of spiritual experience and happiness that just by seeing us, people will think, what's wrong with you? I mean, what's right with you? Like, why do you look so happy? Why do you look so joyful? We're all here in this world, and somehow or other, I see a smile in your face that I don't see in anybody else's face. So Mahaprabhu preached by his ecstasy, by his bliss. But we don't generally preach like that. We have a more organized system. And you can see how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was aware of this. He was concerned about this. And so he simultaneously, along with experiencing ecstasy in the world, he left behind him an organized system for Krishna consciousness to be distributed in this world, right? How did he do that? Well, there were a few things Mahaprabhu did. The first thing he did was he started the first, you could say, preaching program. He told Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda, I want you to go door to door, and I want you to humbly beg people, please, my dear sir, chant Hare Krishna, right? This was the start of the movement for spreading Krishna consciousness. He said, do it like this, go door to door, knock on people's doors, whether they are sinful, pious, impious, doesn't matter, and encourage them to chant Hare Krishna. The second thing he did was he instructed Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, his main disciples, to go to Vrindavan and to write books. And these books are the foundation for our Krishna consciousness movement today. When Srila Prabhupada came to America, he wrote books. He distributed those books. When Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted to spread Krishna consciousness, he wrote books. He wrote songs. He printed literature. So this idea of creating a systematic, organized way of spreading spirituality in this world with the foundation of deep philosophy, that was the mission of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. And that was the vision Mahaprabhu had, because he didn't write any books, but he instructed Srila Rupa Goswami. In the Madhya Lila, we see 2 chapters dedicated to his instructions to Srila Rupa Goswami that became Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He instructed Srila Sanatana Goswami that became Hari Bhakti Vilas. And by composing these literatures, the Goswamis in Vrindavan were able to create a very systematic, you could say, systematic and scientific presentation of Krishna consciousness, right? They were able to delineate some very important ideas. Like, for example, what does it mean to be a Kanishta Adhikari, a Madhyam Adhikari, an Uttama Adhikari? What are the different stages of bhakti? How does one go from a stage of, complete materialistic consciousness to a state of deep ecstasy? And this is very unique. In many of the spiritual traditions of the world, we talk about God, we talk about experiencing a relationship with God, but we don't find a very systematic step-by-step progression, right? What does it mean to be a devotee at the stage of Nishta? What does it mean to be a devotee at the stage of Ruchi, right? It's not like just like, you're materialistic and then you're God conscious. You don't just go from like 1 to 100, there's stages of growth. And Srila Rupa Goswami was able to explain all of that very scientifically. And in this way, Mahaprabhu was able to create a system for how Krishna consciousness could be explained, could be practiced, could be understood, right? The third thing he did was wherever he went, he preached to people to stay in their positions, but practice Krishna consciousness and preach in their local environment, right? Specifically, he told the Kurma Brahmin in South India, I'll just read the verse here. When he was traveling through South India, there was this Kurma Brahmin who said, I'm so inspired by you that I want to leave, I want to travel with you. I'll just read, it's just a few verses. It says, this is Mahaprabhu's traveling through South India. It says, in one village, there was a Vedic Brahmana named Kurma. He invited Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his home with great respect and devotion. This Brahmin brought Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his home, washed his lotus feet, and with his family members drank that water. With great affection and respect, the Kurma Brahmin made Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu eat all kinds of food. After that, the remnants were shared by all the members of the family. Then the Brahmin began to pray, "O my Lord, Your lotus feet are meditated upon by Lord Dhama, and these very lotus feet have come into my house. My dear Lord, there is no limit to my great fortune. It cannot be described. Today my family, birth, and riches have all been glorified. And now here's the point. The Brahmana begged Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, my dear Lord, kindly show me favor and let me go with you. I can no longer tolerate the waves of misery caused by materialistic life. So he was a grihasta, he had a family, he had children, but seeing the joyful ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he thought, enough with householder life. I have to work, make money, so much hard work, right? So let me just give it all up and go with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and just be in ecstasy for the rest of my life. But what did Mahaprabhu say? Mahaprabhu replied, don't speak like that again. Don't say like this. You have a dharma, you have a family. Better to remain at home and chant the holy name of Krishna always. And then Mahaprabhu said, instruct everyone to follow the orders of Lord Krishna as they are given in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way, become a spiritual master and try to liberate everyone in this land. If you follow this instruction, your materialistic life at home will not obstruct your spiritual advancement. Indeed, if you follow these regulative principles, we will again meet here, or rather you will never lose my company. Such beautiful instructions. Mahaprabhu is saying this to the Kurma Brahmana, but he's also instructing all of us, because most of us have families or will have families, that if we use our house, not just as a place to eat and sleep, but our house becomes a temple, where we are ourselves worshiping God, we are praying to God, we are becoming God conscious, Krishna conscious, and we are learning the sacred scriptures. And then through our house, we are using that facility to then instruct others about Krishna consciousness, then our householder life will not obstruct our spiritual progress. Such a beautiful passage, right? I sometimes feel bad because I remember when I was a younger practitioner of Krishna consciousness, I was living in the temple and I was a brahmachari. And I used to think, yeah, what is this, getting married and having a family? These things are such obstructions to Krishna consciousness. And why waste your life, having a family and doing these things? Why not just, be a monk? And because I was naive and I thought this is the only way to make advancement in spiritual life, right? To be a monk. But now as I'm studying Krishna consciousness more carefully and I'm finding these sections, I'm realizing that actually bhakti or Krishna consciousness is so much bigger than our own conceptions, right? That even somebody who's a householder and could make more advancement than somebody who's a monk, because he's actually using his facility to nicely practice Krishna consciousness and spread Krishna consciousness. Whereas somebody who's a monk could just be becoming lazy, thinking, anyways, I'm a monk and I'm not married and I just live in the temple, so I'm just automatically becoming an advanced devotee. That's not true, You don't just automatically become an advanced devotee. So Krishna consciousness is so broad. Anyway, so here Mahaprabhu is doing, what he's doing is he's instructing most of the people in Kali Yuga, because most of us will have families and homes, that, hey, use your facility to yourself practice Krishna consciousness and then give it to others. So we can see here through anecdotes, one, by instructing Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda, he started the modern Sankirtan movement. Please go out, knock on people's doors and tell them to chant Hare Krishna. By instructing the Goswamis, write books and find these holy places and excavate Vrindavan, because when people come to Vrindavan, they'll be inspired. When people read your books, they'll take up bhakti in spiritual life. And by his instruction to the Kurma Brahmana, Mahaprabhu is very concerned that the ecstasy and joy that he's experiencing is something that others in Kali Yuga can also access, right? It may not happen as quickly as Mahaprabhu showed in his own life, but at least systematically we can start to practice Krishna consciousness and grow in our Krishna consciousness and eventually come to the state of ecstasy. And so Mahaprabhu expected that those of us who follow in his footsteps will then carry on this tradition of simultaneously trying to experience Krishna consciousness, but then also distributing that Krishna consciousness, right? So we're simultaneously practicing it and we're simultaneously becoming carriers of bhakti. And this I found to be a very, very powerful, you could say, combination, this ability to not only just practice Krishna consciousness, but also carry and spread Krishna consciousness. I have a verse here now I would like to share from Chaitanya Chandramrita, another nice verse that will highlight a little bit about what is the mood of our preaching, what should be the mood of our sharing of Krishna consciousness. Let me just pull it up here real quick. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada Saraswati says here, let me just share my screen. That way, if anybody wants to see the verse in front of their eyes, they can. Maybe we can even sing it. Let's see. Okay. Do you all see my screen here? Yes? My screen is visible. So this is the verse. It's text 67. And Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada Saraswati says, he says, O Lord Chaitanya, O merciful one, O supremely generous one, O Lord, who fill the heart of the living entities with the different mellows of devotional love. O wonderfully splendid Lord, O golden complexioned Lord. So beautiful as we repeat these words. I encourage you, please meditate. Please maybe try to see in the eye of your mind this beautiful form of Lord Chaitanya walking through Jagannath Puri and lost in chanting the holy names, this golden complexioned Lord. O ocean of transcendental virtues, O personified nectar of devotional love, O Lord, who are fond of chanting your own holy names, I pray that without ever becoming tired, I may pass my life always chanting your holy names in this way. Such a beautiful verse. And I picked this verse out because I think it shows very nicely this dual combination of relishing and sharing Krishna consciousness. Because the devotee becomes very aware that actually it is God, it is Krishna, it is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who can actually deliver living entities, right? He says here in this verse, you're the one who is filling the hearts of others with devotional mellows. Then he also becomes aware that if I want to give access to other people to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, I myself have to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So then he prays, may I dedicate my life to always singing and chanting your holy names. And this, I think, is a special blessing of the preaching mission, that when one becomes very inspired to want to somehow become a carrier of bhakti, to somehow spread Krishna consciousness in this world, in any way, by the way, we'll talk about this later, but please don't think that, oh, I'm just doing deity worship in the temple. How can I spread Krishna consciousness? I'm not living in a van like Huron and distributing books. I'm not giving lectures. I'm not writing books. I'm not publishing anything on Instagram or social media. We will talk about this later. It is not that only those who distribute books or who are on social media, that only they can spread Krishna consciousness in this world. That is not true, actually. There's so many ways to spread Krishna consciousness. But the first and most important thing before anybody gets that far is first understanding the mood of a preacher in Mahaprabhu's movement. And the mood of a preacher in Mahaprabhu's movement ideally should be that, my dear Lord, I want to become a carrier of bhakti, and therefore let me carry bhakti for you. And therefore let me also relish Krishna consciousness by having a very deep and kind of genuine practice of spiritual life. Because if we're not experiencing Krishna consciousness, then when we share something with others, it's not going to go very deep because we ourselves don't have that experience, right? We're simply speaking, we're telling others, worship God, think of God, but we ourselves in our own lives may not be experiencing something very, very deep and profound. But when the preacher is trying very hard to have a deep experience of Krishna consciousness, then his or her sharing or preaching will be very, very natural, and will feel very authentic and very real, and will be very effective also, actually, because only someone who is a little bit pure and a little bit empowered, a little bit experiencing Krishna consciousness can actually then carry that bhakti and facilitate spiritual life for somebody else. And this mood of simultaneously relishing and sharing is something that was actually at the core of Krishna's desires. So we see in the Adi Leela, when Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is discussing the reasons for Mahaprabhu's appearance in this world, he cites two verses. He says something here in the Adi Leela. This is why Krishna decides to appear in the material world. Let me share my screen really quick. Very famous verse. I think most of you are very familiar with this verse, so we don't have to discuss it too deeply. Well, we will discuss it deeply, but we don't have to explain it too much because it's a very famous verse. Prema rasa niryasa karite aswadana raga marga bhakti loke karite pracharan rasika shekhara Krishna parama karuna e dui hetu hoite ichara udgama. The Lord's desire to appear was born from two reasons. This is why Krishna comes to the material world. One, the Lord wanted to taste the sweet essence of the mellows of love of God. Krishna wanted to know what it's like to love himself. Very interesting. this is a whole other topic, right? But it's such a unique idea of God, that God is coming to experience what it's like to love God. He wants to know. He knows everything in this world. He knows the hearts of all living beings. What he doesn't know is what it's like to be in love with God, because he's God. He doesn't know what it's like. So he gets curious. He has this desire to want to know, what is it like, to have love for God. And he wanted to propagate devotional service in the world on the platform of spontaneous attraction. Thus, he is known as supremely jubilant and as the most merciful of all. So 2 reasons: he wanted to taste Krishna consciousness, and he wanted to propagate Krishna consciousness, but not just any kind of Krishna consciousness. He wanted to propagate the Rag Marg, spontaneous attraction, which means one is drawn to Krishna very spontaneously, not because, I remember one time I was distributing books in Chicago and I met this Christian girl and I said, do you believe in God? And she said, I do. I said, why? I just asked her point blank. I said, why do you believe in God? And she said, because I don't want to go to hell. That was a good answer. That's good. That's good. We should, it's very nice that people want to, believe in God because they're afraid of going to hell. But that kind of devotion for God is mixed, right? It within that devotion to God is this fear that, oh, if I don't worship God, I'll go to hell. So I want to make sure I don't go to hell. So therefore I will worship God. That's very nice. It's not bad. Nothing wrong with it. But that's not what Mahaprabhu came to give. He didn't come to give devotion for God based on that fear of not going to hell. He came to give devotion to God that was based on attraction. What does that mean? It means one looks at Krishna and thinks, Krishna is so beautiful. Radharani is so beautiful. Vrindavan is so beautiful that I will do whatever it takes to give pleasure to the divine couple. That is called the path of attraction. When one thinks of Radha and Krishna, Radha, Madan, Mohan, and thinks, Krishna, whatever you want to be happy, whatever will give you pleasure, I will do it. There's no consideration of, can I actually do it or not? What if I'm not qualified? This, that, so many other things. No question. One spontaneously is tuned into this mood of wanting to give pleasure to Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada writes here in the purport, so beautiful. He says, I'll just highlight this so you can see the section I'm reading now. This is the passage I'm going to read. He says, but the real purpose of Lord Krishna's appearance was to stage a dramatic performance of his transcendental pastimes at Vrajabhumi, thus exhibiting the highest limit of transcendental mellow in the exchanges of reciprocal love between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Right? These reciprocal exchanges of mellows are called Rag Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord and transcendental rapture. Lord Krishna wants to make known to all the conditioned souls that he is more attracted by Rag Bhakti than Vidhi Bhakti, or devotional service under scheduled regulations. So this could be a huge discussion on its own, but just to put it very simply, for the sake of this particular discussion, that Krishna wanted to show the world that, look, I'm attracted to spontaneous affection. When people love me without any other motivation. And that's true in our human relationships also. Like, for example, I know Gaurahari and Vaijayanti for so many years. If I come to Gaurahari's house and I say, Gaurahari, I have this nice cake for you. I brought some presents from America. And Gaurahari maybe thinks, why is Harisham being so nice to me? Does he want my apartment? What does he want? If there's some doubt in his mind, then even though I'm offering these nice things, he cannot accept it with all his heart. Because he knows once he accepts it, then I'll go, so by the way, Gaurahari, I was wondering if you can give me this, this, and this, right? And for most people, this is how most people approach God, is this. They go to God and they say, I will pray to you, I will give you some money. But in fact, in India, there is a temple called Balaji. It's a temple of Lord Vishnu in South India, a very famous temple. Very famous because whoever goes there, many of them get their wishes fulfilled. And every hour, they receive like 100,000 euros in donations every hour. Because what happens is, people go to this temple and they tell Vishnu that, my dear Lord, I will make you a 20% partner in my business. So if my business takes off, I will give you 20% of my profits every year. And like this is very common. They say like this. And then, of course, their business is successful. And then they come and they throw money and gold. And that's nice. People are at least, they're making a relationship with God. But that's a business transaction, right? It's like coming to Gaurahari, giving him a gift, not out of love, but because I want something from him. And Krishna is saying, that's nice, but that's not what draws my heart. If you want my heart, that is not the kind of bhakti that I want. I want that bhakti of the Vrindavan residents, that spontaneous devotion service. And that is what Mahaprabhu came to give, along with relishing it himself. So this point of Mahaprabhu coming to give something and at the same time relishing it brings us to the point, the question I asked at the very beginning of this class, which was, How do we experience what Mahaprabhu came to give? And the simple answer is we have to develop a desire within our heart to want to give it to others. What happens when we pray to Krishna and say, Krishna, I want to give pure devotional service to others, is we ourselves will become inspired to study Krishna consciousness, to chant the holy names, and to pray in that mood of wanting to experience that rag marg, that spontaneous devotional service, that pure devotional service, because we have developed a desire to want to give it to others. And as soon as that desire awakens within our heart, like Krishna, somehow or other, please use me as your instrument to give bhakti to others, it's almost impossible to not go deep in your own spiritual practice, because you realize it's kind of like, if for example, you have to teach a course on deity worship, right? Like, for example, I remember, who was it? I believe it was Damodar Priya at Goloka Dhama, who teaches deity worship, right? So if she's being asked to teach a course on deity worship, she has to know all the mantras. She has to know all the funny hand signals and everything, right? Otherwise, what will she teach? So as soon as she decides, I will teach deity worship, and now all the devotees have come, and Damodar Priya cannot just be like, well, hold on, let me just Google it real quick. They're gonna be like, come on, we can Google it ourselves. We don't need you, right? No, she has to be expert. She has to be so good that no matter what question they ask, she has the answer. And that's the secret magic of the preaching movement, that as soon as we develop a desire to become carriers of bhakti, to want to give Krishna consciousness to others, it is almost impossible to not go deep in one's own spiritual life. You have to. If you actually want to help somebody experience Krishna consciousness, you have to yourself be experiencing Krishna consciousness. You have to yourself be deep in your spiritual life. Now, if you're just gonna do something where you don't have that desire, and maybe you just want to do something very, very basic, then you're not going to go that deep in your spiritual life, right? If our desire to share Krishna consciousness stays very, very basic and very fundamental, then naturally we're not going to want to go very deep, because we don't need to, right? But the magic of the preaching movement is, as soon as we desire to give someone the highest thing, or something high, maybe not the highest thing, right? Maybe something very high, then it's almost impossible to not want to practice it in our own life and not prepare ourselves to experience that high thing, so that we can become carriers of bhakti and give it to others. And it'll drastically impact all aspects of our spiritual life. As soon as we start praying like that, my dear Krishna, use me as an instrument. Like, for example, suppose Gaurahari has this, now he's in Switzerland. When he goes back to Goloka Dhama, he wants to really do deity worship for Radha Madan Mohan, and he prays the deities before going to sleep. My dear Radha Madan Mohan, please engage me in your deity worship. Engage me in deity worship. Then when he wakes up in the morning, he'll prepare himself. He'll take a bath. He'll get ready, waiting for maybe the pujari will call and say, hey, Prabhu, this pujari is not feeling well. Can you come and do the Mangal Arti, or can you come and do the Guru Puja? But he will prepare himself to do that service. In the same way, when we pray to Krishna, my dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, use me as your instrument to give in this world what you came to give, that spontaneous devotional service. Then we will find that, okay, now I must prepare myself. Now I must understand what is Krishna consciousness. What is bhakti? How do I explain Krishna consciousness? How do I chant in such a way that when I tell others to chant and they ask me questions, I can explain things with my experience. I can explain things with confidence and conviction. So I personally discovered that wanting to be a carrier of bhakti is probably one of the fast track ways of going deep in your spiritual life. Not that I'm very deep in my spiritual life, but I do find that when I do pray to become a carrier of bhakti, to spread Krishna consciousness, I find some motivation in my spiritual life to go deep, to experience something deeper. So I found this little sort of, I had this experience that when we desire to give Krishna consciousness to others, then we become motivated and inspired to go deep in our own spiritual practice. Now the question comes, well, how do we do it, right? How do we do it? And I think there we shouldn't be limited by thinking about our situation and our circumstance. Like, for example, some devotee might think, well, I'm just at Goloka Dhama, it's in the forest, there's not that much going on, there are not so many visitors, so how am I supposed to preach to people? I think before we even think about all those things, the most important step is to first just develop that desire within our heart. No matter where you are, if we develop that desire within our heart, like, I want to be used by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to deliver Krishna consciousness, to bring others to Krishna consciousness, to spread Krishna consciousness, to be a carrier of bhakti, then Krishna will facilitate. This is my understanding, that we just have to have the desire to be used as an instrument, and then it is up to Krishna to find a way and a means to facilitate our material circumstances in such a way that all of a sudden we find that we are becoming a source of inspiration to somebody else. And another really interesting point is I sometimes find that in ISKCON, we think of preaching as something that happens to, and again, this might not be the case at Goloka Dhama, but many times we think of spreading Krishna consciousness as finding somebody who is not a devotee, and then we make them a devotee. That is definitely one way to spread Krishna consciousness. But we have to also remember that there are many devotees who are already practicing Krishna consciousness, and they're stuck. They might be stuck at the platform of, Nishta Bhakti or Anatana Vritti, or they're still stuck at Shraddha. They don't have the faith to accept a guru or get initiated and advance in their spiritual practice. You can almost say it's even more important to help those devotees who have already accepted Krishna consciousness to grow in their Krishna consciousness than to find somebody who is completely not a devotee and make them a devotee, right? Because this person is already accepted, but their progress is being paused, it's stopped, and they're stuck at a certain point. So when we develop a desire within our heart to help spread Krishna consciousness, Krishna might use us to serve devotees who are feeling not so inspired. And by our friendship and our association, they get inspired to read more, to chant more, to offer more service, to go to Vrindavan and like Gaura Hari and Vaijayanti just walk around with their gamchas and their chadars and just eat rotis and just visit holy places and be completely Krishna conscious. So who knows how Krishna will inspire this devotee to advance in their spiritual life? But it has to begin with the desire within our heart to we want to use as an instrument. And as soon as that desire comes within our heart, then Krishna will highlight, Krishna will inspire some way in which how we can be instruments in either helping someone else's Krishna consciousness expand, or maybe our job is to find people who are not at all interested in spiritual life and we're bringing them to spiritual life. That's between Krishna and us, how he will use us. But the main point I wanted to bring on today was that Mahaprabhu's movement, the movement for Bhakti Krishna consciousness, is a simultaneous movement of sharing and relishing. And when one is able to tap into this mood of wanting to share Krishna consciousness in however way possible, then their ability to relish Krishna consciousness will become deeper and grow also at the same time. And that's just how Mahaprabhu's movement is, because it's a movement of mercy. It's not a movement of just purely relishing Krishna consciousness, nor is it a movement to just spread Krishna consciousness, right? There's a group of Christians called the Jehovah's Witnesses. And for them, it's really all about just proselytizing. They just try to convert people to become Christians. That is their sadhana, actually. I spoke to many of them, and for their philosophy, literally their sadhana is just to go out and try to convert people. Okay, that is one end of the spectrum, which is you just focus on trying to convert people. The other end of the spectrum is you don't worry about converting anybody. You just stay in your kutir and you just do your bhajan and relish, But Mahaprabhu's movement is somewhere in the middle, where we should try to help others, but we should do it with having a deep experience of spiritual life. And when we can do both at the same time, that's when things become very, very dynamic. So this is my presentation for today. Sorry, it's 3 o'clock now. I was hoping to stop in 25 minutes. I apologize I took so long. I hope it wasn't so maybe too boring or something. Any reflections? Anybody wants to share some reflections or just comments? You're all nice devotees. I'm sure everything I shared today you already know. So maybe you can add to what I've shared today.
I would have something from my side, but maybe we can just check in the temple room first, if someone from the temple room would have a commentary or question.
Haribol.
Haribol. Go ahead, Valentina.
She is again muted. Valentina, anyone there has a question?
Or even a reflection, maybe not questions first, maybe a reflection, something you heard that you were inspired by, or something you want to add something to, A reflection is also very nice. Haribol, Valentina.
Syama.
Haribol.
Haribol, thank you for your class. It's very inspiring.
Sure.
I have a question. Can you give us some advice to prepare ourselves for the appearance day of Gauranga? For who is living in temple, it's more easy because we have a deity here, we prepare ourselves for the feast. But for who is home? So if you have some... Thank you.
my suggestion would be, thank you for bringing this out. My suggestion would be, in order to prepare for the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is to read his pastimes. And if one does not find so much inspiration in reading, then there's some really nice classes by people like Madhavananda Prabhu on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, explaining, you know, the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the teachings, the pastimes. I found for myself this absorption, and for me personally, Chaitanya Bhagavat, I'm reading this every day, and I'm taking a lot of notes, and I'm just so much getting absorbed in like Mahaprabhu as a young person before he comes to take sannyas, you know. And I'm thinking about Mahaprabhu now because the stories are so attractive, and I think pastimes are a very powerful way to think about great personalities. And also, if possible, do some kirtan. You know, I was going to read a passage actually in Chaitanya Bhagavat. There's a conversation between Haridas Thakur and some brahmanas, and they ask Haridas Thakur, what kind of chanting is more powerful, soft chanting or loud chanting? Which one is more powerful? And Haridas Thakur explains actually that it is actually, let me just read to you exactly what he says, because it's so inspiring. And I think this is another way we can prepare for a Gaur Purnima, is if we can somehow do some kirtan in our houses. He says, Haridas Thakur says, my dear sir, please listen to the conclusions of the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam. When any living entity, be he human, animal, or insect, hears the holy name of the Lord chanted by a pure devotee, he goes directly to the spiritual world. One who chants the holy name to himself liberates only himself, but one who chants loudly liberates anyone who hears him. It is for this reason that Shastra asserts that the loud chanting of the Lord's holy name is 100 times more effective than other religious processes. You know, sometimes we're not able to go out on Sankirtan in Chicago because it's so cold, but we have some plants in the house. And I think to myself, well, at least we're doing kirtan and the plants are getting liberated. So it doesn't have to be out on the streets in front of hundreds of people. Even if you have a few plants in your house, you have a dog, chant loudly and the dog is getting liberation. So in other words, my suggestion would be to prepare for Gaur Purnima is read Mahaprabhu's pastimes, especially Chaitanya Bhagavat or Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and try to do some kirtan. This was Mahaprabhu's main method for delivering Krishna consciousness in this world, is the loud chanting of the holy names. Try to do some kirtan, thinking of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, thinking of how he was walking through Navadvip, singing and dancing, walking through Jagannath Puri in ecstasy. That kind of kirtan will become filled actually with the love of Mahaprabhu. And if we do kirtan thinking of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then our chanting of the holy names will be infused with the love that Mahaprabhu is himself relishing. It will not be just ordinary kirtan. So that would be my suggestion. Anybody wants to add something, or anybody else wants to add to what I said?
Yeah, from my side, I thank you very much. I have some reflection from the lecture in general, and especially into giving Krishna consciousness to others. And I was somehow drawn back in the beginning of my Krishna consciousness when I was living out of the temple, where preaching was my only way of survival, living without devotees. And I was actually very often praying to the Lord, please give me an opportunity to share Krishna consciousness to others. And that will come often, and that will be very nice. And then I remember we had a lecture, a Sunday Feast lecture with Ananda Vrindavan Mataji, a disciple of Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and she was there at the last initiation of Bhakti Tirtha Swami that he gave when he was already quite sick with cancer. And she explained that when Maharaj gave the initiation, just before giving the initiation, he told his disciple or future disciple, he said, if you think you will get initiation and you will just do your 16 rounds and follow the rules and do your own Krishna consciousness, I give you permission and blessing to stand up and not get initiated and leave. If you want to stay here for the initiation, I want you to be fully dedicated in helping people and helping the world. And so I also noticed sometimes, I think even our spiritual master Sachinandana Swami will say that they are how you say, survey that very often spiritual people are very egoistic and do not care. They don't have much compassion and do not care so much about others, how they are doing. They're just mostly concerned for their own. And I see sometimes myself, I'm a little complacent and don't think it's so important to help others, and feel I feel shy maybe to to try to push someone where they don't want to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm thinking to which extent I will need to be bold in preaching, and to which extent I should just go along with what people actually want to do or like to do. So that was some thoughts on that. And yeah, if you can help me to be a little bit more bold, maybe, or a little bit more compassionate or interested about the welfare of others.
Well, I think you're very compassionate, and I see how much you care about the devotees. So I don't know if I can help you become more compassionate, but I do have one reflection of the point you made, because I also am somebody who doesn't like to force people. And I was never attracted to this mood of like trying to force somebody to be Krishna conscious, or try to like, like you have to do this and you have to chant. Even here in Chicago and also with our preaching, I don't generally like talk about rules too much. I try to just inspire them with the beauty of spiritual life, and let them ask me on their own, like, hey, what kind of rules should I follow and what should I be doing? And so that's my style. I don't like forcing people also. One reflection I have on this point, the Gaura Prabhu, is just like there are people in this world who are not interested in spiritual life, and they're the ones that, if we meet them, they will feel like we're forcing them. There are actually millions of people in this world who are very eager for spiritual life. And I think our business is to find those people. And when we pray to become instruments to spread Krishna consciousness, somehow Krishna will bring us in contact with those living entities who are ready to hear something spiritual. May not be very deep, may not be very big. The lordships will also bring us in contact with those devotees who find inspiration by our association. Because not every devotee in ISKCON is going to come and listen to your class or ask you for advice, but there are a few who will. When you pray to become an instrument, the ones who will be inspired by you, Krishna will send them. And Krishna will somehow facilitate a relationship with those devotees whose heart you can touch, and you don't have to worry too much about, am I forcing them? Am I making them do something they don't want to do? Because now Krishna is using you as his agent to touch the hearts that he wants you to touch. I'll tell you one quick story, really quick, very brief. One year I came for Vyasa Puja, and I was flying back to India, but I had an overnight layover in Amsterdam. I was at the airport the whole night. And just the flight that it was. And I was really praying to Krishna. I said, I want to somehow infect somebody. I want to somehow talk about spirituality with someone. I'm just desperate, Krishna, please use me. And so I'm walking around, I find this cafe. It's this cafe, and I see this young man, very cheerful looking young man behind the counter. And as soon as he sees me walk by, and everything was closed because it's like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, he just looks at me, smiles like, hi. And I was like, okay. I said, hello, how are you? And then we just struck up a conversation. His name is Michael. And we just started talking. And he was just super cheerful, super friendly. He offered to make me a cup of tea. He offered to give me some salad. He just liked me from the get-go. And he took a break from work and came and sat with me for 20, 30 minutes. And this was almost 3 or 4 years ago. And somehow, by Krishna's arrangement, I was back in Amsterdam on the return flight from India back to America. So again, I met up with him. And this time I gave him a book. And he actually asked me, he said, can you teach me how to meditate? So when I went to America, I recorded a video of myself doing a guided meditation, how to chant Hare Krishna, and I sent it to him. And we've stayed in touch, like still on WhatsApp. He messages me every couple of months. We talk. He knows that I used to be a monk. He has Prabhupada's books. I've given him prasadam because one year I was coming back. One year I went to Amsterdam to distribute books after I came back from Vrindavan. So I was actually in Amsterdam for like 2 weeks, and he came and met with me. I gave him a little prasad. We took a walk together. And that was just, I really still feel like that was Krishna's arrangement. I was just praying because I wanted to somehow, I felt like, I don't know, sharing Krishna consciousness. And it was a dead airport. Nobody was around, but somehow there was one soul he's eager to learn. And Krishna was like, good, I was waiting for somebody to say, I want to spread Krishna consciousness. And be it in this person's association. And then he sent me, to help this living entity, to serve this living entity. So yeah, I think, I really feel like the first and most important step is just want to be an instrument to somehow spread Krishna consciousness. And then who we have to preach to, how, where, all of that, Krishna will take care of. Krishna will take care of. That's my understanding. Please, you can add something. You can correct me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. No, it's very, very, very nice. I just wondering, in the lecture, I took some notes. I'm not sure I took it right, but it makes sense. I was writing that with the desire to give Krishna consciousness to others will come the desire to become deeper in our own Krishna consciousness. Did I got it
Yeah,
right?
yes,
It was,
yes,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay, that's powerful, powerful quote.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, right? It's
Yeah.
at the heart of Mahaprabhu's movement is I came to relish and I came to give. And so when we tap into that mood of I want to give, but I also want to relish, then Mahaprabhu's like, yes, that's my spirit. I will bless you to go deeper in your spiritual life. So anyways, I think that's it. No, anybody has anything else? Reflections or?
I have to check. Maybe we can have a last view in the temple. I know usually at 3 o'clock they serve prasad and some might be waiting there, but we can just give the last voice to Valentina if someone else in Goloka Dhama temple would like to share something.
Ribol,
Ribol?
can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you
Yeah,
fine.
no, devotee doesn't have question. Thank you, Arisyam.
Haribol.
Hari.
Jai. Okay, so then we close, yeah? Gaur Hari Prabhu?
Yes, it was
Okay,
a pleasure.
Jai.
Thank you so much for being with us, Harishyam. It was very nourishing, enlivening, and very great to have your darshan. Thank you for taking your time for the few of us who were today for the Sunday feast.
I'm very grateful to be here. Vanchakalpatru Vishakapasan
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.